Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I'm your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. Hey, everybody. How's it going? What are we getting into today?
Well, first things first, I'm happy to be home. And this damn cold won't let me go.
Oh, yeah, you haven't been feeling good. You've been away for a while now.
Yeah, 12 days in Alabama.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, nothing is better than being home and sleeping in your own bed.
True that.
Yeah. I've got an old story for you today, and you're not going to like it.
Oh, goodness. So, chitlins are getting hurt, right? Is that what we're talking about? You frickin', I don't even know. Frickin' and frick. This is how you're going to start my day, talking about some murdering kids.
You know what? Yes, we are doing that, and I just love to get you all fired up. I love it.
All right, well, is it going to be a straight shot? Are you just going to tell me about some horrible stuff, or are you going to give me some kind of leeway to make believe the kids are fine?
I'm not giving you any leeway to make sure that they're fine. Nope.
All right. So what is it about? What are we talking about? How long ago was this?
Well, it's an old one. It's way back in the late 1800s, 1891 to be exact.
Oh, older than dirt. Okay.
Older than dirt. So does that make it any easier?
Well, I guess, because everybody died early back then.
All right, well, let's get into it. This is Season 9, Episode 4, The Coldwater Girl, the murder of Nellie Griffin in 1891. It's January 1891. The Coldwater State Public School in Michigan was home to dozens of children. They were wards of the state, children whose families could not or would not care for them. For many, the dream of adoption was the only hope of finding a home. On a gray day that winter, a man arrived at the school, introducing himself as Mr. Hendershot. He claimed to be a farmer from Parma, Michigan, with a wife and children. He told the superintendent he was looking for a girl he and his wife could bring into their home. The man was in his early 50s, graying, serious, but polite enough to be convincing. He didn't appear wealthy, but he carried himself with authority. To the staff at Coldwater, nothing seemed especially off. And so, the man who called himself Hendershot was given permission to adopt. The girl he selected was Nellie Griffin. She was young, around 11 or 12, small, with brown hair. Now, to those who knew her, she was gentle and quiet, like many children who had spent their lives in institutions. But within weeks, Nellie was gone, murdered. The man who signed the papers as Hendershot was in fact Russell C. Canfield. His motives were darker than anyone could have imagined. Today, we're going to take you through this story step by step. The background of Coldwater State School and Michigan's adoption system in the 19th century, the deception that allowed Russell Canfield to walk into an institution and claim a child, the disappearance, the investigation, and how Nellie was found, and finally, the trial, the plea, and the community's response. This isn't just a story about one man and one victim. It's also about trust and how institutions designed to protect children could fail so catastrophically. To understand how this tragedy happened, you need to know about the Coldwater State Public School, sometimes called the Coldwater Orphanage. The school was built in the late 1800s as Michigan's answer to a growing problem: what to do with children left destitute, abandoned, or orphaned. Before its founding, children often ended up in poorhouses, sharing space with adults suffering from poverty, addiction, or illness. Coldwater was supposed to be different. It was modeled on institutions in New York and Massachusetts. Oh, God. That's a word I'll never get right.
Massachusetts.
That's how I see it. Massachusetts. Massachusetts. Massachusetts.
Yeah, Massachusetts.
Hey, that sounds pretty close. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. All right, moving on.
Anyway, since I've already interrupted you to make fun of you, what kind of addiction was there in 1891? You said like children that were abandoned by, addiction.
No. They were in poorhouses that were filled with adults that were in poverty, suffering addictions or illnesses. So they could.
Yeah, I want to know what adults were suffering what addictions in 1891.
I guess alcohol. I don't know. What other kind of?
I know.
Huh?
Yeah, I don't know. You said it, so I was thinking to myself, like, what did they have out there? I mean, I guess they had opium, I guess.
Right?
But now I'm going to have to look it up.
Yeah.
Now you gave me homework. What the hell's with this crap?
Well, I'm reading the next part. You better Google some shit.
All right.
Okay, get on it. All right, so a place where children could be raised, schooled, and ideally placed with families who wanted them. But the system was far from perfect. Adoption in 1891 wasn't what we think of today. There were no rigorous background checking, no home studies, no social workers visiting houses. A man like Mr. Hendershot could walk into Coldwater, spin a believable story about a wife and a farm, and walk out with a child. Bonkers.
Yeah, that is a little bit crazy how easy it was. But then again, you're talking about a time where, people were owned and kept and traded, including women. So This shouldn't be that surprising to us.
True. Now, the staff relied heavily on trust. Trust that people were who they said they were. Trust that children would be safe. And that trust, in this case, was fatally misplaced. On January 22nd, 1891, a man identifying himself as E. Hendershot appeared at the school. He said he was looking for a girl, not too old, but strong enough to help around the farm, and young enough to be molded into a member of his household. He told the superintendent he had a wife waiting at home and 2 children already in his care. He spoke of wanting another child for companionship. It sounded plausible. That right there sends chills down my spine. The next day, he returned, and this time, he asked to look at the children himself. It was unusual, but not unheard of. Staff permitted him to visit the cottages. He moved among the row of girls, asking their names, ages, watching them. Then he stopped at Nellie. She was, in the eyes of the staff, a good candidate for adoption. She was quiet, respectful, and in good health. And so, just like that, Nellie Griffin's life changed course. She was discharged from the school into the custody of Mr. Hendershot. No one could have guessed she was walking into the hands of a killer. So, who was Nellie? She was described in records as around 11 or 12 years old. Not much survives of her personal story. Like many children in state custody, the details of her life are lost to time. But we know she was one of the countless children caught in a system that valued placement over protection. Her vulnerability, Her lack of family advocates, her trust in adults, made her easy prey for someone like Canfield, and that's exactly what happened.
That is a sad story that obviously, like you just said, many children were there and they prioritized placement over protection because protection wasn't really so much of a thought as of back then. But I did look up, while you were telling me some more of the story, I did look up what adults were addicted to. And we were pretty good with the guesses about opium. In 1891, opiates were the thing that people got addicted to, but particularly laudanum. When laudanum was an opium tincture, people were also addicted to morphine and also cocaine, because they used to put cocaine in a lot of medications back then. So all different forms of cocaine people were taking. But mostly it was the opium derivatives in the tinctures that they would make things with. You know, all the snake oil that they'd sell back in the day.
That's right. I'm so glad you looked that up. Laudanum, totally forgot about that. And, and every time I think of that, I always think of Interview with the Vampire. And then, of course, cough syrup.
A lot of cocaine in it.
Yeah. Ooh, thanks for looking that up, Google Queen.
Yeah, so let's get back to this poor orphan that nobody was looking out for.
All right. Now, after leaving Coldwater, Nellie and her supposed guardian were seen boarding a train. Witnesses later remembered the girl, small, plainly dressed, clinging nervously to the man's side. Now, instead of traveling toward a farm in Parma, as Hendershot claimed, they traveled in a different direction. The man seemed restless, avoiding questions, changing his story about who Nellie was and why she was with him. Now, at some point, Nellie disappeared. She simply vanished. Days later, a body was discovered near Diamonddale, Michigan, about an hour north of Coldwater, and it was the body of a young girl. The corpse showed signs of violence, and the investigators were horrified. Now, I'm going to spare you the details because we don't want that. The body was taken back to Coldwater for examination. Staff members from the state school were summoned. The grim task fell to them to determine if the child was one of their own. Several officials confirmed the identification. This was Nellie Griffin, the girl handed over to Mr. Hendershot. The staff trusted him. They had released her to him, and now they had to face the devastating reality their trust had delivered her to her death. Law enforcement moved quickly. The man calling himself Hendershot was already suspicious. Few in the area knew him, and his story just didn't add up. Investigators uncovered his real identity, Russell C. Canfield. Now, Canfield had a checkered past, rumors of dishonesty, instability, and predatory behavior, but none of it had been enough to stop him from reinventing himself under the false name and walking into an orphanage to claim a child. As the news spread, public outrage exploded. A child had been taken under the pretense of adoption and murdered almost immediately. When Canfield was arrested, emotions in the community boiled over. A mob formed, demanding vengeance. The murder of a child stirred feelings of rage so intense that authorities feared Canfield would be lynched before he ever reached trial. Reports from the time describe angry crowds surrounding the jail, threatening violence. The sheriff was forced to increase security and secretly move the prisoner to avoid bloodshed. The public wanted swift justice, but the courts had to proceed by the law. Canfield would soon face trial, but before the gavel ever struck, he made a decision that changed everything. In a surprising move, Canfield confessed to the murder of Nellie Griffin. The details of that confession were not published in full, perhaps because they were too horrific for the papers of the time, but the admission was enough to seal his fate. By confessing, Canfield avoided a protracted trial, and perhaps more importantly, he avoided the risk of vigilante justice at the hands of a furious mob. I get it. When Canfield appeared in court, he looked older than his years, worn down, gray, his expression flat. Reporters described the atmosphere as tense, with spectators crowding every available space. When the charges were read, he responded in a low, steady voice.
Guilty.
Gasps filled the room. For many, it was the first time they'd heard a man so calmly admit to the brutal killing of a child. The judge accepted the plea. There would be no lengthy trial, no parade of witnesses, just a sentence. Russell Canfield was sentenced to life imprisonment. There was no death penalty verdict, at least not through the courts. His life would be spent behind the walls of a prison instead of in the gallows. Now, as we've talked about many times, there is no death penalty in Michigan. Now, there was at one point. I just can't remember if this was around that time, and it may have been. For the community, the sentence was both a relief and a frustration. Relief that justice had been served within the law. Frustration that the man who had murdered an innocent girl would still go on breathing, while Nellie was not. Newspapers across Michigan and even in other states carried the story. One headline described Canfield as, quote, the inhumane murderer of little Nellie Griffin. Another paper detailed the sorrow and outrage felt across Coldwater and Dimondale. In an era when crime reporting was often sensational, this case stood out, not just for its brutality, but for the vulnerability of the victim. A child, an orphan, handed over by the very institution meant to protect her.
No doubt this case probably led to a lot of quality improvements in the orphanage, I'm sure. Have all those safety rules and guidelines and, waiting periods now. Unfortunately, they were probably all construed because of animals like this.
Mm-hmm. This was probably the absolute impetus for that. I agree.
Yeah.
Now, in the days following Canfield's arrest, newspapers began asking hard questions. Why had the school superintendent accepted Mr. Hendershot's story without evidence? Why was there no requirement for references, no background checks, no confirmation of family or home? The uncomfortable truth was that adoption in the 1890s was a loose system, built more on optimism than oversight. The hope was that children would find better lives outside of the institution, but the mechanisms to ensure their safety were nearly non-existent. Nearly, I'm going to say non-existent, period.
Yeah, I'm still not really clear on the fact that he just went in there, said, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I would like a child. Let me sit here for a bit and shop, and then walk out with a child. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, a female child, and please let me pick the one I really want the most. Unreal.
Yeah, the whole thing is mind-blowing.
Yeah, makes me mad as hell. Now, Nellie's death was a wake-up call, as we discussed, a horrifying example of what could happen when trust was given too freely. In Coldwater, in Dimondale, in Parma, the grief was palpable. For the staff of the Coldwater School, the burden was especially heavy. They had looked into the face of Mr. Hendershot and believed him. They had handed Nellie into his custody, and they had to live with the knowledge of what had followed. Community members mourned the little girl many of them had never met. Newspapers called for reforms. Clergy delivered sermons about the dangers of misplaced trust and the sacred duty to protect children. Nellie became a symbol of innocence lost, of institutional failure, and of the urgent need for change. As for Russell C. Canfield, he faded into obscurity behind prison walls. Records indicate that he lived out his sentence, a man condemned by the public and forgotten by history. Unlike many criminals of his era, he left behind little in the way of prison records or interviews. His name survives only because he is tied to Nellie's. And in many ways, that's fitting. His life became a shadow, defined not by his own identity, but by the harm he caused. The story of the Coldwater Girl has endured for more than a century. Local historians in Michigan still recount the tragedy. Old newspaper clippings resurface in archives and on library shelves. Each time it is retold, it serves as both a warning and a remembrance. A warning that institutions must never sacrifice caution for convenience, that children's safety must come before trust in strangers, and a remembrance that Nellie Griffin's life, though short, mattered. If this case happened today, we like to think the outcome would be different. Background checks, home visits, social workers, fingerprinting. The safeguards of modern adoption systems are designed to prevent tragedies like this one. But the case of Nellie Griffin reminds us that systems are not only as strong as the people who run them. Trust is vital, but so is vigilance. Every time we create institutions to protect the vulnerable, we must remember how quickly trust can be betrayed. As we close, I want to bring the focus back to Nellie herself. She was a child, young, hopeful, and powerless against the world around her. For more than a century, her name has been carried in whispers, in newsprint, in local memory. By telling her story, we make sure that she is not forgotten. Now, before we end, I want to leave you with some questions to think about or to discuss with others. What responsibility did the Coldwater School truly bear in Nellie's death? Was it negligence or simply the weakness of a system that didn't yet know better? Should Russell Canfield have been executed for his crime, or was life imprisonment the more just punishment? And how do we balance trust and oversight today in systems where children are still vulnerable? Now, these are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones.
Like you said, it's been over a century. And unfortunately, we still kind of have problems, not very unlike that initial problem, is that people adopt for the wrong reasons. And there are just some inhumane humans out there that do really twisted crap.
Yeah, I mean, remember Ricky Holland? He was adopted. It still happens. It still happens no matter what the safeguards are. I think people just get a little more tricky and conniving.
Yeah, it definitely, unfortunately, still happens, but we have some safeguards in place. And eventually, we'll all be a little bit more humane to all other humans.
Agreed.
Is my hope, at least.
Yeah, mine too. So thank you for joining us for this episode of The Coldwater Girl, the murder of Nellie Griffin in 1891. And if you found this story important, share it with someone who cares about history, about justice, and about the protection of children. And most of all, remember Nellie. As always, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.